this presentation is from a book project that sort of came to me. So maybe a little self-disclosure. I'm from Kenya, and I spend quite a bit of time there. My research interests include foreign policy, but global political economy and development. And in that kind of context, I think a lot about economic development and what is possible and what is not. So I'm going to begin this by maybe um, the conclusion that I have arrived as part of this book manuscript project. So in 2000, there were 8 Millennium Development Goals that were supposed to sunset in 2015. They did. They were replaced or supplanted by the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them. Now, one of the things that I think has been lacking in both sustainable and Millennium Development Goals is the question of sociocultural traditions and religion. And in my assessment, actually addressing those would have been more important than some of the other targets and goals that came about. So this is so the hopefully someday the book will be out there. Now, so this will be in theory the third chapter of the book. So it focuses on MDG number 3 to promote gender equality and empower women. Now, MDG number 3 has only one target. Some of the other goals have different targets. And so to me, it almost sounded like like a missed opportunity, because while I think that eliminating gender disparity in primary and secondary education and all education levels is important, I don't agree that that's probably the best way to promote gender equality and empower women. I think there's other ways, and we shall talk about those. So the broader argument for the whole project is that most MDGs they really addressed almost peripheral issues. And so those sociocultural and religious causes of underdevelopment, because, MDGs are primarily about development. I think those are sociocultural traditions influence a lot of how society is constructed, and not addressing them, even though I consider they are very difficult to actually address, it's I think it's a great missed opportunity. Now, so again, if you look at some of those targets, I think the that target for MDG3 was underwhelming, even if we did achieve gender parity in education. Again, education is important, and but I keep thinking about the contribution of education to equality, and I'm not sure that that's the most. So the other maybe MDGs that I found to be slightly underwhelming is, for example, the MDG1 is to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Now, so the poverty rates at that time were based on less than $1.25 per day. And so today we base eradicating poverty, or extreme poverty is considered earning less than $1.90 per day. But if you actually convert the spending power of $125, which is what was the standard in 1990, its equivalent is $2.84. So even if, for example, today we were to achieve eradication of poverty, we'd be basing it on an unequal standard, or halving the population that suffers from hunger. But So again, if you, for example, look at that, 1 billion people are hungry, and that was almost 20% of the planet, which is a lot. Um, in 2014, so 1 year before the MDGs ended, um, almost 800 million people are hungry, which was actually a great improvement. But today, again, hunger has almost doubled. Um, Now, I think it's SDG number 2 that aims to eradicate hunger. So we only have 7 years. I'm not sure that we are going to meet any of those goals. Um, Now, so on focusing back on um, MDG 3, promoting gender equality and empowering women, to me, this is the one goal that carries half of the world's population. And while the other goals and targets sometimes can be more associated with Africa, so things like hunger or malaria, this one addresses half the world's population because, even if you think about the United States, there's still a lot of income inequality, health disparities, and so on. So I thought that MDG3 could have actually had more impact if it had been so constructed. Now, I might briefly talk about gender inequality because I think gender inequality is at the heart of MDG number 3. And so there's a UN definition of gender inequality, which combines labor market, education, empowerment, and health. And so again, the question is that the best way to think about gender inequality? And is that wholesome? Because I think social, cultural, and religious impacts are also somewhere in there. So in terms of the countries that are most gender unequal, the bottom 10, and I do focus quite a bit on Africa's economic development. And so you can see the bottom 10, other than Tonga, Afghanistan, and Yemen, are in Africa. Again, reiterating that maybe the MDGs were primarily about developing countries, except this one goal that encompasses the whole world. Now, the usual suspects at the top are right there. So, what should have been maybe the focus of MDG 3? Now, this is derived in part from my studies in places like Kenya. So, property ownership and inheritance. Um, if you think about women's access to the formal economy or like banking, these are some of the biggest challenges because if you don't have property, you cannot really um, put up collateral. Um, Other things like better representation. Now, so Kenya here is an example because actually the 2010 constitution has a clause that requires that no more than 2/3 of elected positions go to one gender. So no one gender in theory should have more than 2/3, which would be about 33% of women. In the National Assembly, there's a bit of that, the introduction of what we call women rep. So every constituency, every district, so maybe congressional district would also have a woman representative. So other things like elimination of religious and cultural practices that are harmful to women, FGM is one of those. Early enforced marriages. Again, these are social cultural issues, and apparently this was actually staggering to me. Almost 20% of all marriages are entered before age 18, and there's actually a number there of marriages entered before age 12, which, again, sounds like. So things like creativity in foreign aid, so funding, use of social capital, but also maybe redirecting aid so that instead of losing so much aid, some or at least a portion of it goes to women's organizations. Now, there's other things like valuing care work and its inclusion in the GDP, funding of women's grassroots organizations as a way to develop leadership so that then women can probably run for political office. Supporting agriculture. So again, if women produce about 80% of the food in the global south, it seems to me that agriculture would be something that should be supported. And then things like ending violence against women, which again sometimes is based on sociocultural perceptions of what those relationships should be. Now, luckily, the at the sunset of MDGs, SDGs kind of clued in on this. Yeah, so, however, I still think that by 2030, actually, the evidence suggests that by 2030, we shall not have managed to do all of those things. Again, it seems to me that even the SDGs did not address the sociocultural traditions and how those impact economic development. So MDG number three it did not achieve its goals, even though if you read the assessments of, for example, the UN, there have been some, it's almost like some have been achieved and we'll see some of those. So for example, the school enrollment um, is achieved parity. So although now we are beginning to go back to about 100%, school enrollment did actually achieve parity. Now, secondary enrollment, so again, remember the idea was primary, secondary, and eventually tertiary education, that there would be parity. So there isn't. By 2015, the sunset of the goals, we had only achieved 75% instead of 100% parity in enrollment. Now, if you, so again, the deception, it's not deception. I don't think they intended that. But the challenge is in the numbers. If you look at on the left, these are the numbers for countries, for the developed countries, and you can see their enrollment, percentage enrollment is over 100. The world is at 76%, as we saw previously. But if you look at the countries that actually would have been targeted by the MDGs, and this is sort of just the bottom countries. You can see how far they are from parity in enrollment in secondary schools. So in terms of gender parity, we can see primary enrollment. We did achieve the parity, so there's no gender there's no significant differences between enrollment for boys and girls in primary schools. Now, so I pivot slightly to think about, so we looked at primary, secondary education, but what about tertiary education? This is, again, figures from Kenya, enrollment from 2016. And as you can see clearly, there's more males than women who are enrolling in higher education. Um, I wanted to visit the next door country, Tanzania. You can still see the numbers for males are higher than women. So clearly, MDG3 did not achieve its goals because these are numbers after 2015. Now, so what about other countries, say Egypt? So even in Egypt, you can see the parity is still not there. But also, if you think about sub-Saharan Africa, which in development circles is really highlighted, the average enrollment of women in universities and colleges against the rest of the world is really low. Political empowerment, again, and this is even maybe looking forward to 2030. So it seems to me that MDGs now 2015 was a great, target, but if you look at this graphic, so the world will take 132 years. South Asia will take about 200 years to achieve gender parity. And so some of these, again, I contend are brought about by social cultural issues. And, again, this is women in leadership roles. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wind this here with perhaps maybe a quote from the president of Zaire, then Zaire. now Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so you can sort of, this is a president speaking. We wish to definitely end all forms of discrimination. It remains the case that in each household there will be a patron. With us, it is the one who wears trousers. So these kinds of um, maybe thinking by leaders of countries is part of what socioculturally will not lead to missing the MDGs, and I think will lead to us missing the Sustainable Development Goals. In the interest of time, I will stop there, and I'll look forward to your questions at the end and contributions to thinking about